Hi, everybody. So this is our math lesson, and we're going to continue on with multiplying decimals. We're just going to walk through the lessons that we normally use in class. Anytime I say pause the video, that's because I'm waiting for you to work out a problem for your practice. Okay, so let's get started on some review. Let's go ahead and add these decimals up. Now, when you're adding decimals, I want you to think, what is something important for you to do when adding decimals? Hopefully, you're thinking about lining up the decimal and then putting a place-holding 0 so that we have the same number of digits behind the decimal point. Go ahead and pause the video and add those up. Okay, let's check our answers here. We should have 19 and 31 hundredths. Notice again how the decimal places are lined up vertically, and we put that 0 as the place holding 0. So that way, especially when we subtract, we have the same number of digits to work with behind the decimal point. Today, our goal is to find the products of decimals and whole numbers using repeated addition and decimal fractions. So this is going to use what we just did with adding decimals here. Okay, so let's remind ourselves a little bit that multiplication is a fast way of what? A fast way of what? Go ahead and say it out loud at your computer. A fast way of adding numbers, just like division is a fast way of subtracting. So here we have this math problem, and we're 4 times 3 and 62 hundredths. So we need to find a product here of that. Well, let's think about it. Multiplication, let's say I was using 2 times 3. 2 times 3 would be 2 groups of 3. And then I could add 3 plus 3 and get my answer of 6. So if we apply that same principle to this problem, we would add 4 groups of 3 and 62 hundredths. Before we do so, let's go ahead and estimate. We can estimate at the end of the problem or at the beginning, but we do that so that we can check if our answer makes mathematical sense. If I'm looking at this problem in your head, maybe you can do it now, would it make sense for me to get 100 as my answer? Would it make sense for my answer to be 1? No, we know that those don't make sense, but that's because you're doing some estimation in your head. So let's go ahead and show that on the computer screen right now. This you can write down in your notes, or you can just remember to practice it in your head to check if your answer is mathematically reasonable. So here we have 4 times 3 and 62 hundredths. I'm going to estimate that 3 and 62 hundredths to 4. 4 times 4 gives me 16. So my answer should be around 16. Okay? Should our answer be above or below 16, and why? Well, because we rounded the 3 and 62 hundredths to 4, we rounded up. So 16 should be above our actual answer. Our answer should be below the 16. Okay? Which two whole numbers should it be between? Well, it should be between 16 and, let's say we rounded this down to this whole number of 3. Well, 3 times 4 is 12. So I should have an answer because this decimal here is between 3 and 4. I should have an answer between 12 and 16. So let's go ahead and have our 4 groups, 1, 2, 3, 4 groups of 3 and 62 hundredths, and we just get to add them up. Notice that we've lined up that decimal point, and each digit behind that decimal point has another digit from the other numbers to add. So let's see. 2 plus 2 is 4, 4 plus 2 is 6, 6 plus 2 is 8, 6 plus 6 is 12. 12 plus 6 is 18. 18 plus 6 is 24. Write the 2 above the next place value and the 4 down here because we have 2 wholes now from adding that many tenths together. 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. 8 plus 3 is 11. And 11 plus 3 is 14. So our answer is 14 and 48/100. Let's check that back with our estimate. Earlier we said that our answer should be between 12 and 16. Is 14 and 48/100 between those two numbers? Absolutely. So that answer makes mathematical sense. Your turn to try. Whether you have a piece of paper or a whiteboard, I'd like for you to try this problem out. 2 7/10 times 4. Go ahead and pause the video so you can work this out. Don't forget to estimate so that you can check if your answer makes mathematical sense. Okay, so hopefully you estimated this to be about 3. So 3 times 4 is 12. So my answer should be around 12, but my answer should be below 12. It should actually be between 2 times 4. Let's see, 2 times 4 is 8. So my answer should actually be between 8 and 12. And my answer that I came up with was 10 8/10, which makes sense. That's between 8 and 12. Perfect. Moving on, the next example in our math notes. 96/100 times 3. Again, we're finding a product. Let's go ahead and estimate to see where our answer should be around to check if it makes mathematical sense. 96/100 is the number I'm going to round, which I'm choosing to round to 1. So 1 times 3 gives me 3. Should my answer be above or below the 3? Well, I rounded 96/100 up to 1, so that means my answer should be lower or below 3. Which two whole numbers should the answer be between? Well, had I rounded this 96/100 down, even though that's not the proper way to round, I would have gotten 0, and 0 times 3 is 0. So my answer should be between 0 and 3. Let's go ahead and do our 3 groups of 96/100. 1, 2, 3, and let's line up those decimal places, and each digit has a number above it. Perfect, so let's go ahead and add. 6 plus 6 plus 6 gives me 18 or 18/100, 1/10, and 8/100. Okay, let's keep adding. 1 plus 9 is 10. 10 plus 9 is 19. 19 plus 9 gives me 28. So now I have 2 ones and 8/10. 2 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 2. Bring down that decimal point. Is my answer between 0 and 3? Yes, so my answer makes mathematical sense. Okay. Your turn to try with this problem. Again, let's make sure that we are estimating to check to see if our answer makes mathematical sense. Is it reasonable? Pause the video. Okay, so this number I would round to 1. 1 times 6 gives me 6. Had I round down to 0, even though that's not the proper way to round, 0 times 6 would be 0. So my answer should be between 0 and 6. Oh yes, I got something that makes mathematical sense. 3 and 24/100 is between 0 and 6. Is it possible to write a decimal as a fraction? Hopefully at this point in the year we know that's true. Every decimal that I say the same way as I say a fraction. 2/10, 3/100, 52 thousandths. I can do that and write the decimal or a fraction. So on your whiteboard or piece of paper, go ahead and try to write a fraction for 900ths, 2700ths, and this decimal here that I'm going to let you try without me actually saying it, because that helps a little too much. Here we go. 900ths is 9 over 100, 900ths. 2700ths is 27 over 100, 2700ths. And this guy was 3/10. 3 over 10, also known as 3/10. Perfect. So we know we can write any decimal as a fraction. So we're going to go ahead and use that technique with solving this problem here. 4800ths times 3. Our estimation for 4800ths times 3. This, if I round it, 4 stays down, so the 0 is going to go to a 0. 0 times 3 is 0. So my answer is going to be pretty small, close to 0. Had I made this a 1, 1 times 3, that would be 3. So my answer is going to be between 0 and 3. Now, should my answer be above or below 0? It should be above 0, right? Because neither one of these have an actual value of 0. So my answer should be between, again, that 0 and 3. So let's go ahead and change this 4800ths to a fraction. I'm going to multiply by 3, but this time I'm not going to use that repeated addition. I'm going to use a different technique that we're pretty familiar with from earlier in the year. 4800ths as a fraction would be, go figure, 48 over 100. I'm going to multiply that by 3. Now, say it aloud. What do I need to do before I multiply these two things? I have a fraction here and I want to multiply a fraction. So I'm going to change this 3 into a fraction. Once it's a fraction, all I have to do is multiply straight across. So let's go ahead and do that. 48 times 3. Well, I don't have that one memorized, guys. Sorry to tell you. So let's go ahead and set it up so we can figure it out. 3 times 8 gives me that 24. The 2 was in the tens place, the 4 in the ones place. 3 times 4 is 12, and 12 plus 2 gives me 14. So my numerator is going to be 144. 100 times 1 gave me 100. So here I have a fraction ready to go. Now, that fraction can be written as a mixed number, 144 over 100. I can make one whole group of 100 from 144, and I have 44 remaining. Now, 1 and 4400ths, that sounds a lot like a decimal. So what is it as a decimal? It would be 1 and 4400ths. 1 and 4400ths. This is just the second technique of these that we're going to go over with multiplying decimals. A couple more of them we will go over, but these are two that I want you guys to get in the practice of because you're really using techniques that you've learned before. Okay, here's one that we have now, 6600ths times 5. I would like for you to do the estimation and come up with a decimal fraction. We're not adding this number 5 times. We've already practiced that skill. So let's go ahead and change this to a decimal fraction, meaning it's a fraction, and multiply it out that way. Pause the video so you can try it out. Okay, so when I estimate 6600ths times 5, well, that would be 1 times 5, which is 5. My answer should be between 0 and 5. All right? Then I'll come here. 6600ths as a fraction is 66 over 100. If I multiply that by 5, that 5 needs to change into a fraction, which is 5 over 1. 66 times 5, I didn't know that, so I had to write it down. 5 times 6 was 30. 5 times 6 was 30 plus 3 is 33. I have my numerator. I can make 3 whole groups of 100 from 330, and I have 30 remaining. So now I have 3 and 30 hundredths, which as a decimal is written as 3 and 30 hundredths, which is the same as 3 and 3 tenths. Okay, let's see some more here. 2 and 6 hundredths, 2 and 6 tenths. 2 and 6 tenths times 4. Let's go ahead and estimate. That 2 and 6 tenths, I'm going to estimate up to 3. 3 times 4 gives me 12. Okay. Should my answer be above or below 12? It should be below 12. It should be smaller than 12 because I rounded this number up to 3. Okay. What two numbers should it be between? Well, had I rounded this to 2, 2 times 4 is 8. So 8 and 12 are my little markers that my number should be between. Okay? Now, what is 2 and 6 tenths written as an improper fraction? 2 and 6 tenths written as an improper fraction. Well, that would be 26 tenths. 26 tenths. Because if I did 2 and 6 tenths, and I did my Ferris wheel, 10 times 2 is 20, and 20 plus 6 is 26. Okay? So, now I have 26 tenths. I'm going to multiply that by 4. 4 written as a fraction is 4 over 1. We multiply fractions straight across, 26 times 4 and 10 times 1. I can do 10 times 1 pretty easily, but 26 times 4, I don't have that memorized. 4 times 6 gives me 24. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 2 gives me 10. So that's our numerator, 104. And then that 10 times 1 was 10, 104 tenths. Well, how many groups of 10 can I make from 104? I can make 10 whole groups with a remainder of 4. 10 and 4 tenths. Well, let's see. As a decimal, that looks like this. 10 and 4 tenths. 10 and 4 tenths. Here's one for you guys to try. 1 and 8 tenths times 6. 1 and 8 tenths times 6. Go ahead and pause the video and try that one out. Let's see. 1 and 8 tenths. Again, I could Ferris wheel. 1 times 10 is 10, and 10 plus 8 is 18. 18. So I'd get 18 tenths. I'm multiplying that by 6 over 1, because that's what 6 is as a fraction, 6 over 1. 18 times 6 gives me 108. 10 times 1 gives me 10. I was able to make 10 whole groups of 10 from 108. 10 and 8 tenths is our answer. The number written as a decimal is 10 and 8 tenths. Going back to my estimation, I took this number rounded to 2. 2 times 6 is 12. Well, 10 and 8 tenths is pretty close to 12. Had I rounded this down, even though that's not how you round, this would round to 1. 1 times 6 is 6. So my answer is between 6 and 12. This number is between 6 and 12. So my answer makes mathematical sense. Okay, we're at our closure. So this is the time for you to see if you can multiply these numbers using repeated addition. So how many groups am I going to make of 1 and 4 tenths? I'm going to make 3 groups and add them together. Here we go using decimal fractions. Okay, I'm going to make this into a fraction and multiply by 8 and then change that 8 into a fraction. Well, let's see. So this one would be 1 and 4 tenths plus 1 and 4 tenths plus 1 and 4 tenths. I'd apologize for the handwriting, but it's not that much worse than my actual handwriting. So here we go. 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 12. 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 4. 4 and 2/10. Let's see if I estimate. This is close to 1. This is 3. 1 times 3 is 3. If I had rounded to 2, 2 times 3 is 6. My answer is between 3 and 6, so I'm good. Okay, here we go using decimal fractions. This would be 3/10 times 8, also known as 8/1, which gives me 24/10, which I know is 2 and 4/10, which is the same as the decimal 2 and 4/10. All right, guys, that's it for that lesson. If you have any questions, please go ahead and email your teacher with those questions. I hope that it made some sense for you. If you have to, you could always rewind the video.